Chapter 16. The Foxhound Field Trials. Marshall was one of those tireless, fidgety sportsmen who, when on holiday, try not to waste a moment. No sooner were he and Johnny back from the Everglades, and he began to plan a trip to the north of the state to attend the annual Foxhound Field Trials, which brought together many spectators and men from various parts of the country, who were especially interested in fox hunting and anxious to have their hounds win prizes, and if possible the championship. It was not surprising to anyone that Marshall wanted to enter Reddy, who had shown such ability in chasing the Florida gray foxes that there had not been one of them found in the woods within miles of the Marshall house. Those he had caught quickly moved to less dangerous regions after finding out that Reddy could outrun and outguess them no matter what tricks they tried. Johnny knew almost nothing about field trials, but soon became deeply interested, for he felt confident that no hound could run a fox or anything else as well as Reddy, and he wanted very much to test this. Also, for once it was a chase without the danger to the hounds, except from any possible rattlesnake bite, and for that emergency he would carry along a tourniquet, anti-venom serum, and a hypodermic syringe. The entry blanks were secured and duly sent off, and then a training schedule for hunting foxes regularly, wherever they could be found, was arranged by Marshall to ensure tip-top form for the big event. Reddy seemed always in first-class condition anyway, because he was active and naturally healthy, but the trials, which might last through several days, Marshall and Johnny planned to give him every possible advantage, and they did their best to see that he had long hunts in a number of good localities. The one thing that worried both men was the fact that all hounds who were competing would be run together as a pack for comparison of their work. On opening day, before the weeding out process had begun, there might be 100 or more hounds of all ages, types, and dispositions, but all were trained to hunt in pack formation, each one trying to find a fox, to get the lead when the fox was running, but also willing to hunt with the others and honor the leadership of the hounds, which happened through luck or otherwise to be in front. If any hound did not cooperate this way in the chase, the judges would certainly eliminate him, since the ancient sport of fox hunting depended on good teamwork of every member of the pack. Would Reddy, who was not accustomed to this kind of hunting, ignore the work of the other hounds? That was the big question, for there seemed to be no chance to give him any training along this line unless they left the southern Florida, which would have been very inconvenient. "Well, Johnny," Marshall remarked one evening after they'd returned from one of the practice hunts, "if Reddy won't run with the others, then you and I will take him somewhere far off to the side and have the very best kind of one-hound hunting all to ourselves. But I hate like everything to think of not winning that cup." "So do I," sighed Johnny, "and Reddy can do it, and do it easily, if he understands what's expected of him." "Well, it's up to you to make him understand." That was all that Marshall could add, and he saw to it that Johnny familiarized himself with every rule. So the day came when Big Reddy was led to the rear of the waiting automobile and given a rousing send-off by Mrs. Marshall and the children. Even some of the neighbors had come to see the start and add their good wishes. The trip was a long one, over concrete roads for the first part of the way, and then sand roads among the little blue lakes separated from each other by stretches of pine woods. Close around each body of water was a ring of many low palmettos and gallberry bushes. This was the rolling sandhill country, sparsely settled and far from the coastal swamps, but it was ideal for hunting. It made Johnny's breath come more quickly just to look at it and see its possibilities for Reddy, whose size would not be a drawback here if there were no masses of briars and tangled vines. The pine woods were carpeted with sparse short grass, and small palmettos over which Reddy's bounds should take him more easily than in the fine sagebrush country of Wyoming which he knew so well. By late afternoon, they'd reached the little town that had been chosen as the headquarters for the trials. Already its main street was crowded with cars and men leading hounds, as the trials for young hounds had been in progress for 3 days and had ended that afternoon. The event in which Reddy had been entered was called the All-Age Stake and would begin in the morning, as near daybreak as possible. Marshall had made arrangements to stay at the bungalow of a friend named Alfred Jones who lived nearby. After asking his way a few times, found the little house and the whole family of wife, mother, and 3 children at home. 2 beautiful black, white, and tan hounds were enclosed in a yard, and they set up a great baying when they sighted Reddy, who looked nearly twice as big as either of them, and not at all troubled by the commotion. The Jones family knew enough about hounds to be greatly impressed by Reddy, and just a little jealous, for he would compete with their pair. However, they were sports and did everything possible to make the visitors comfortable. After a wonderful dinner of fried chicken, ham, yams, boiled turnip tops, and pie, they sat on the porch smoking and talking, while watching one fine-looking hound after another being led past by anxious handlers who were quartered in town and wanted to exercise their charges. They ranged in color from nearly all white to nearly all black, the majority being black, white, and tan. Johnny had never seen so many good hounds together, and began to be more worried than ever about Reddy's chances. But his worries were nothing when compared with the consternation that the sight of Reddy caused among other fox hunters. It was not just his great size that caught their eyes, but something about the confident way which he walked and the evident intelligence and good breeding that held them. One after another stopped at the yard, until at one time there was a group of more than a dozen, politely asking Johnny questions and appraising Reddy. Later, 3 men strolling together, and unaccompanied by hounds, stopped casually and nodded to those on the porch, took a good look at Reddy, and then sauntered back toward the town. "Did you recognize them?" asked Mr. Jones. "Those were the 3 officials. The short, stout one with the black felt hat is Colonel Calvin. He's president of our association. Evidently they heard about your big hound and were interested enough to want to have a look at him. That means he's sort of a dark horse, singled out already as a newcomer who may prove to be a dangerous competitor. But I don't think I ever saw a hound that created so much stir ahead of the trials. By the way, have you entered him in the bench show?" "No, we haven't," answered Johnny. "He's only in the field trials." "And why not enter him tonight?" suggested Mr. Jones. "I'm no judge, but I think he's got the best conformation of any hound I've seen so far. Except for all those scars, he's a magnificent specimen. He's eligible if he runs in the trials. The bench show will be held the day after they close. Don't miss the chance to try him anyway. You might surprise some of the wise guys who run useless hounds just because they look pretty and win ribbons on the bench. It's that way every year. You'll see a hound named Ranter entered in the trials, who couldn't trail a fox for a mile, but who always walks away with bench show honors. It's a crime. Your hound won't have a chance against him, for he's perfect. But you might get one of the other bench prizes. Let me enter him for you." Mr. Jones became very enthusiastic, and soon half convinced Johnny and Marshall that it was sporting to at least try. After some argument, they agreed, and Mr. Jones jotted down the names of Reddy's father and mother and their owner, and then he put on his hat and hastened up the street. "He is that way," laughed Mrs. Jones. "I can see that he's taken your Reddy to his heart, and he's going to bet on him against the whole field. Well, it begins to be exciting." It was much more exciting the following morning. Reddy had slept in the living room of the house, and he was in high spirits when everyone came down, before it was light, for a very early breakfast. He knew perfectly well that this meant a hunt of some kind, and he capered around the little room until, to save the chairs from being broken, Johnny sent him outside. There he romped with Mr. Jones' hounds in the best of good humor, until it was time to paint his entry number, 35, on both of his sides before putting him in the automobile and starting for the trials. Mr. Jones showed the way by leading in his car, and soon they joined a procession of cars loaded with men and hounds, all going in the same direction. Besides a particularly beautiful little lake, all the cars were parked among the live oaks, and soon disgorged excited hounds on leashes. 2 men, already on horseback, directed things, and saw to it that the crowd, mostly on foot, gathered on a sandy ridge nearby. Mr. Jones had horses waiting at the side for Marshall, Johnny, and himself. The master of hounds, on a little chestnut horse, rode up and called the number of each hound to make sure that all were present, and arranged in a semicircle facing him. At his signal they were to be unleashed, all together. By the time the sun, like a great big red ball, was rising above the horizon, everything was in readiness. Amid a sudden hush, the master held up his hat and threw it down, shouting, "Let them loose!" And every hound was set free. They started forward, confusedly at first, and then in a slow-moving mass, and then gained confidence that began to run toward the bushy hollow dead ahead of them, with 3 judges riding at each side and a short distance behind, hustling their horses into positions from which they could see everything that the hounds were doing. 2 hounds that yelped continuously without reason were noted as babblers, while those who kept their noses to the ground and quietly hunted were given credit. Among the latter was Reddy, but he held himself very much aloof from the others, and was the only one that headed to the right when they entered the brushy hollow. Johnny knew why. The breeze was from that direction, and it gave him a better chance to catch any scent. With 87 hounds drawing through a thicket, something was quite sure to happen. Suddenly there was a melodious, long-drawn-out note from the center, and then a chorus of voices from the hounds. Presently a great babble, as the bulk of the pack ran from all directions to join those who'd found the fresh trail of a fox. One of the officials, who was acting as field master, kept the spectators in check until the lead hounds had burst from the far side of the scrub and were well away, with a long line of slower hounds stringing out behind, and then everyone ran, or if he was on horseback, galloped. Mr. Jones, red-faced and happy, was trying to keep his pair in view. They had been well up among the leaders. "That's the best start I ever saw! A fox in the first cover!" he shouted to Johnny. The latter and Marshall had galloped with the others, vainly looking for Reddy, who had been last viewed as going into the scrub. Neither could see what had become of him, and certainly he was not with the pack. Just then the last of the judges, who had held back to watch for stragglers, galloped past them. Johnny, his hopes at once completely crushed, watched the judge ride after the pack, whose baying was now coming in a thrilling wave, a sound of which filled the woods. After all, he thought, who could blame Reddy for not wanting to follow a pack of hounds that were strangers to him? It had been almost foolish to even hope that he would do it without any previous experience to guide him. "Sorry, Johnny," called Marshall. "What do you think we can do?" "Not much, I guess. You go ahead with the others, and I'll scout around to see whether he went back." As Johnny turned, he could hear the big pack roaring in full cry, circling the sandhills toward the other side of the lake. He galloped back to the parked automobiles without any sign of seeing Reddy. And the pack was clearly audible to the left. He thought the red hound might have joined it this time. Taking one more look around, low-spiritedly, he decided to head for the other hounds. Reddy, if not with them now, would surely be counted out anyway. Letting his horse pick his own path through the open woods, he tried to enjoy the hound music, which at a distance of about a mile gave a perfect blending of all kinds of tones. With such a chorus it would have been impossible to distinguish Reddy's even, mighty roar. When at length he caught up with the spectators, the clamor, however, died down to an occasional bay. The hounds were in a large group, standing or lying around a burrow, some even rolling in the grass, while the judges allowed their steaming and badly winded horses to calm down. In vain he looked for Reddy, The judges were still observing the hounds, and noting how they acted toward the fox run in the earth. It was a colorful scene, amid the scattered pines and in the bright, mercilessly hot sunlight. Many of the handlers among the group of spectators looked sympathetically toward Johnny as he passed, and a couple cracked good-humored jokes at his expense, well knowing that Reddy, the dark horse, had not been in the running at all. What a flash in the pan he had proved to be! The colossal hound from the west, the killer of wolves and mountain lions. Johnny said nothing, and tried to show no sign of the disappointment which he had felt. Mr. Jones joined him and tried to be cheery, but quickly gave it up. He was bursting with pride, because one of his hounds had been the first to reach the burrow after the fox had holed. That meant much toward winning the cup, and gave him a decided advantage over all the others. A rangy black and tan named Doctor had been second. He was the winner of prizes in a number of trials, and was still expected to win in the coming final tests. "Keep your eye on Doctor" was a favorite expression. Marshall joined Johnny, but scarcely ventured to look at him. He felt very badly, especially as he knew that he was in one way to blame. The right kind of training had not been given to Reddy. The judges soon were mounting their horses and preparing to move on, the master of hounds blowing his horn to call the hounds from the burrow. The cavalcade swung to the right and headed for another bushy hollow, the hounds quickly going ahead and hunting again, but suddenly bunching together very oddly. In the midst of them was a strange animal trying to make his way through the woods. There was such a disturbance that the judges spurred their horses forward. What they saw there was Reddy, and he was dragging something while holding off the other hounds with a series of blood-curdling growls. "Boys, he's got a fox!" someone shouted. Then the excited voices rose on all sides, for the spectators liked surprises, and here was a dramatic one. Reddy was certainly bringing in a big, dead, gray fox, which, held by the neck, dragged between his front paws and made travel very slow, even without the crowding pack. The field master held up his hand to stop the crowd. "What's the meaning of this?" the master of the hounds asked brusquely. "Did anyone check on number 35? He walked his horse toward Reddy, but Reddy did not like this and turned away. He'd made his kill for Johnny, and as the ranger had not come to him, he brought it to Johnny, and no one else. He did not see him in the crowd, and was ready to retreat lest someone steal the fox. Johnny had dismounted and was walking forward. Reddy looked at him for a moment, recognized his walk, and came straight to him with his tail wagging joyfully. He let go of his hold as soon as Johnny took the fox by the leg, and capered about him in his excitement at having safely delivered his burden. Johnny handed the gray, bushy-tailed animal to the master of the hounds, who examined it and made sure it was freshly killed. The spectators tried to come close enough to see what was happening. They were still speechless with surprise. So strange was the whole affair that no one seemed to know what to do. All at once Mr. Jones began to laugh, and then the tension broke and everyone laughed and cheered. "That's the most remarkable thing I ever saw at a trial," commented a little red-faced man to Johnny. "It won't count in his favor, though. They'll eliminate him for not sticking with the pack. Too bad. You've got a fine hound." Johnny knew the little man meant well, and he thanked him. But this, being in the middle of a 5-hour hunt, nothing was said by the master about what the judges might decide. A blast from the horn, a long musical note, and the crowd again broke into action, and the cavalcade moved toward the sun-bathed pine woods to the next bushy hollow. The more high-strung hounds dashed forward furiously. The babblers raised their voices in aimless clamor, while the wise ones went seriously and methodically to work, in the maze of paths and conflicting odors. Wild hogs, black, red, and spotted, were disturbed and sent galloping away, amid much grunting and baying of several unruly hounds. The judges were busy with their pencils. What fox scent remained from the previous night had been so weakened by the sun and dry air that no trail could be straightened out and followed. Therefore, the hunt was carried to the next lake, where the scrub was thicker and higher. Here the huge pack scared up a fox, more by its noise than anything else, and it took the fresh trail in a long line across the scrub and then through the pine woods. Reddy was in the midst of things this time. When the fox broke cover, he was well back with the bulk of the hounds, but the trail led away over the open pine woods, and his huge form seemed hemmed in by lesser ones. He resented the interference, and rushed almost savagely to win clear of it. In great bounds he overtook hound after hound, until he was in the lead with two of them, the great doctor and Mr. Jones' trailer, who were so fast that he could not keep up to the scent, and at the same time outrun them. When the fox, still well ahead, made a turn, Reddy turned too, as if on a pivot, while the other two rushed on, but quickly saw their mistake and swung after him. Now Reddy, however, was in the lead, and he ran as he'd often run in the north and in the west, in great long, swinging leaps that left the others yards behind. Before the fox could reach the next scrub, Reddy was almost on his tail, running then by sight, not scent. The little hunted animal watched him from the tail of his left eye, and seeing that he was completely outclassed, sprang into an oak that had many low branches. Up to the very top he climbed almost like a cat, with Reddy tearing at the trunk and trying to leap up after him. Up dashed the whole line of yelling hounds, followed by the judges. Again, Penciled were busy. "Leave him," ordered the master of the hounds after he'd collected. "We'll pick up another." Well, it's no easy matter to call or drive some of the hounds away from the tree, Reddy in particular. But at length they moved on, and in the next scrub started two foxes. The pack divided, and it was noticed at once that Reddy, Doctor, and the Jones hound stayed together, and once again staged a terrific run, which once more ended in a tree, with Reddy leading the others. The other fox of the pair was such an artful dodger that he escaped his contingent of hounds. By this time those who were on foot were worn out, and everyone was satisfied with the amount of hunting and ready to quit. The horn was blown and the hounds were called, the next trial being scheduled for the following morning at daybreak. Johnny and Reddy were the center of attention. The former received no end of truly sincere congratulations, even from Mr. Jones and the owner of Doctor, although it was evident that no one thought that number 35 had a chance after his bad break on the first run. Johnny, however, felt very proud of Reddy as anyone could have ever felt. "The cup's in the bag," whispered the perspiring but happy Mr. Marshall jubilantly. He was optimistic enough to think that the earlier mishap had been erased from the minds of the judges. "I wonder," answered Johnny. "There are some in the gallery who are talking about having not yet seen Reddy do anything except run after the fox after the hounds started it." The crowd gradually filtered back to the automobiles, and then turned to town where the judges were to gather and determine which hounds had survived this first day's test. Long afterward Johnny heard what transpired in the judges' room. The master of the hounds was recording each judge's notes on the various hounds by their numbers, and when 35 was reached there was an ominous silence at first. According to the rules, number 35 was eliminated by refusal to run with the pack when it found. Hunting on his own hook was an unpardonable offense. There was one among the judges who'd had his eye on Reddy when the pack started off on its run. This was the man who'd stayed behind to check on the stragglers. Up to this point he'd said nothing, but now he spoke up. "I saw number 35 working on his own line in the scrub. I believe he was on the trail of his fox when the pack opened up on the other one. As I see it, he was correct in sticking to his line regardless of the others. I believe that it was just bad luck that the other hounds didn't follow him. In the scrub, no one could see what was happening, and the full cry drowned out any tonguing that number 35 might have made." Silence followed. The master jotted this down, looking around the circle for any word of dissent. Then he studied his notes and remarked that 35 had qualified for the second test. When the announcement was made on the bulletin board, Mr. Jones, good sport that he was, led a burst of cheers that followed. and was the first to congratulate Johnny and Marshall. Everyone laughed, some more in fine good humor, at the strange exploits of the big red hound. These were the main topics of conversation in the whole town. Of the 87 that started, only 39 remained in the running. End of chapter 16.